I encourage everyone to take a moment and breathe and take a tea cheers with Ajiri tea. Ajiri tea recognizes the beauty in shared stories and shared opportunities. Ajiri sources award-winning tea from Kenya, employs women in the region to handcraft the labels, and sends 100% of the profits back to the region to support orphan education. Save 10% on your order of Kenyan teas and coffee with the code BeautifullyHuman at ajiritea.com. AJIRIT.com. Tea mugs up. Hello and welcome to the Beautifully Human podcast. I'm Nick Sheesby. In this podcast, I speak with beautiful humans from all around the world, sharing with you their incredible stories, revealing the power in every human story, to spread love and humanity to a world that is in desperate need of it, to show that we can all connect in beautiful ways, no matter where we come from or what we look like. What you will find out is that we are all beautifully human. Let's all be beautifully human. Hello and welcome back to the Beautifully Human podcast. It has been a while since I have recorded and I am so happy to be back. It feels really good to be sharing these beautiful human stories again. So I am going to start off with a wonderful human that I have met recently and chatted with. Her name is Kari Arabella Lassauniere, and she is based in Denmark at the moment, but tells the story of growing up in South Africa during the apartheid. And I have to admit, I had a massive history lesson just finding out all the details about the apartheid. And I sure as hell did not know everything that was going on. And it was amazingly interesting to hear. We also found some commonalities in our early educations and some panics that we talk about, which are quite funny as well. We also talk about transitioning, and we just have a really beautiful conversation. She is a wonderful, wonderful human, and I cannot wait for you to meet and hear her story. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, rate, review, and subscribe on Spotify, follow along on Instagram, and, just share it around. Let's get these stories out to more people. And as always, enjoy this beautiful conversation. So I love to start these off with a very broad and open-ended question and kind of let you take it from here and see where the conversation goes. And the question is, tell me the story of your life.
Wow, that is a broad and open-ended question. So I was born in South Africa. One of my parents is South African, and one of my parents was a French immigrant to South Africa. And I grew up during apartheid in South Africa, and then I lived in the two polar extremes for a while. I lived in the Cape, and then I moved to the heart of sort of apartheid country in the northeastern end of the country, and then I finished school, and I went off to go and study survey because stupid reasons. And then my parents, wait, that chronologically, that sucks. My parents split up before I went to high school, and then I went to high school, and then I went to study survey for stupid reasons, and then I started working as a surveyor, and I met my wife in this really microscopic, terrible town in the middle of a desert in South Africa. And then we had a kid a couple of years later, and then we moved to Denmark. So yeah, that was that's sort of like a really broad and poorly detailed um, what's your life story, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay. So South Africa. I love it because when you started talking, I didn't know any of that. So I was like, oh, I see. Okay. So what was it like during the apartheid in South Africa?
Yeah, that was that was interesting. Um, so I lived in a very interesting place when apartheid was happening. I lived in um, a little bit of context. The apartheid government made it that black people and white people couldn't live in the same areas. Um, and there were varying degrees of black. There was like black people, and then there was like Chinese people were black, legally speaking. Japanese people were white. Jewish people were white. But people who they were like from mixed families were, they were called a word which was really offensive, I think, in America. So I'm not going to say that word. But they were like not quite black, but not quite white. So it was very weird. They had
Wow.
like strange, weird crap. But we, but there were these little pockets of, I would say, the forgotten white population. And there was like sort of poor white people, um, which was not the norm. And we, we were not well off. We were quite, when I was a kid, we were quite poor. So we lived in an area that was like officially called a gray area, where um, poor whites and people who weren't quite black, but they weren't quite white, they could live there as well. So I lived in like a slightly mixed neighborhood. Um, so and all the white people that lived there, there were a few people who were kind of well off that lived there, but they were very anti-apartheid, so they lived there. So we had some weirdo hippie friends, which were cool.
Yeah.
Um, and then there was like us, which was like, I wouldn't say my parents were pro-apartheid. In fact, I think they were relatively anti-apartheid, but we lived in this poor neighborhood, and so it was weird. We always had this being in this place. We always had this awareness of apartheid and the political prisoners and that sort of thing. I think later, when I moved to a different part of the country that was very much just a privileged white area, I think that the kids were not as aware of apartheid as we were. They just had zero concept that like black people were legally speaking second class, you know, or
Mm.
third class. So um, it it was strange.
Yeah.
It was, and it was just like the pettiness of apartheid was crazy. When I suppose in America you had like Jim Crow laws for a while,
Mm.
and that was people that the problem with it is you don't realize how petty and stupid it actually is. I we, we had some of these widow hippie people, which I've actually maintained friendships with the kids like right through to now. But they had, so my friends' parents lived in this house, and they had some extended family, and they were a white family, and um, one of my friend's uncles was married to a black woman, and the police used to sometimes raid their house at night and come and feel in the bed to see if there were two people sleeping in their bed that night, because they'd raid. And in South Africa, people had like black people used to work in other people's houses as like domestic servants, you know.
Mm.
So like in the garden, it was quite common to have like a small sort of little cottage where I use the word cottage sounds cute. It was more like a living quarters
Yeah.
for like the live-in help to live in.
Mm.
And it was okay if your maid or your gardener lived in that thing, but if they lived in the main house, that was illegal. And you think about this, just
Wow. Yeah. Jeez.
and and these police would come and raid these people's house, and they would feel the bed to see if there were two warm spots or just one. And you know, you I grew up with this thought that, wow, this is just stupid. you know,
Yeah.
you
Jesus.
know, this is petty, and so yeah, and I mean, I was a white kid, so apartheid didn't hurt me.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's no, even as a poorer white person, um, I was still really privileged. I knew that if I finished school, I'd be able to get a good job and everything. But like black people were screwed, you know. Don't you can never. I'm not. I don't want you to think that I'm saying that yeah, it was tough or something for me. No, it wasn't. It
Yeah.
it was it was easy, and there was like I mean, black people they were checked if they were sleeping in the main house, so
Yeah.
so it was
Holy
crazy.
shit.
Yeah.
I I'm really glad that you actually clarified, because once you started speaking, I was like, I don't want to interrupt, but I was kind of thinking I wanted you to go into some detail about what it is, because where I come from, I didn't really know the full spectrum of what it was and like all the craziness that was going on. I mean, that just kind of goes to show the history that we get taught. We don't really get taught about these kinds of
Oh, it
things.
it was crazy. Like on all government buildings when I was a little kid, right? On all government buildings, there was like the main entrance, and sometimes it had a little sign that said for Europeans only, which meant white. And then there was like around the side or at the back, there was another entrance that said like for blacks. And like that's how that was like a thing that it was like it like there were some towns in South Africa where there was a siren that would go off at a designated time at night, like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And if you're a black person in town, they could arrest you and charge you with trespassing, and you could go to jail.
Oh my
So,
god.
and then there was like one of the more insane things is something that people don't know is that South Africa has a really large Indian population.
Mm.
A lot of Indians were brought to South Africa from when the British were running the colonies. They were brought to South
Okay.
Africa as indentured labor. And so there is a very large Indian community in one of the provinces, KwaZulu-Natal, and adjoining to that is another province called I suppose a province would be like our state, what like a state in America
Yeah.
was the Orange Free State. It's now just called the Free State, but it was called the Orange Free State, and that state had a law that Indian people were not allowed to stay there for longer than 24 hours. They were allowed to drive through the state, but it was illegal for Indian people to live in the Free State. So yeah,
Wow.
it wasn't very free.
Yeah, that
It's,
doesn't that does not sound
it,
like a free state. Good lord. And I think too, like unbelievable that they were like classifying like you're white, you're good, you're black, no you're not. Like
Yeah.
between the people
Oh,
in that. That's
and
crazy.
this was all before genetic testing. So
Yeah.
I don't even know if you can pick up if someone's black or white from genes. I don't know. I don't think maybe.
Yeah.
Um,
Not sure
but
either.
but they had tests, and so I know that because there were these people, as I said, okay, there was the black population, and then there was like a group of people that were the descendants of mixed marriages.
Hmm.
So you had or interracial marriages, and some of those people were really light skinned and were white passing. Okay,
Mm.
um, and we all had an identity document, and it stated what your race was, if you're European or, and they had a multitude of different names that were used at different times in apartheid. And one particular group from interracial people at one stage were called plurals. I've got no idea. They were just called plurals. That was like their race. But they had tests to determine if somebody was white or black. And one of the tests that they administered was black people have curlier hair than white people. So they would stick a pencil into people's hair and they would had like a time. And if the pencil slipped out, then they were white. And if it stuck, then they were black.
Wow.
And then, and it happened that you would have like a bit of black blood in a family from like 50 years ago or something. And you would get a kid that was like sort of questionable, and they would class the kid as black, but the parents would be classed as white. It was batshit insane.
Yeah, so what would happen to a kid that was classified as a different race than their parents? Would they be taken, or like did they have to stay in a different version of like a housing for them or something?
Well, I don't think they would have been taken away from their families, but I don't really know what they. I think that they would have had to have gone to a black school
Mm.
because schools were segregated too.
Yeah.
We had two different curriculums. We had um, for for white people, there was Christian national education. It was called Christian national education, and then black people, it was I don't know if this word is if anyone from South Africa is listening and you use this word, just I don't know, it might be insulting. It was officially called Bantu education,
Mm. Okay.
and it was designed to produce laborers.
Mm.
It wasn't designed to actually educate people to
Wow.
being like erudite individuals. It was
Wow. Wow. Wow.
so it was so I think that in that particular case where a child was considered black on their identity documents, they would probably have to have gone to a black school.
I
So
see. Wow.
yeah.
Huh. That is I oh my god. I didn't even know all these details, and it's just like what does South Africa do? What do they say about it now? Do they speak on it, or is it just something that isn't really? Is it kind of like swept under? Because from the States, I know our history. They're really trying to just be like, no, we didn't do anything that bad. It was like, nah, like just trying to kind of get rid of all the bullshit that they were doing. Is that is that going on or?
So what happened was, so when I was about 15, we had our first democratic elections in South Africa, in which um, every single person was allowed, because previously black people didn't have the franchise; they weren't allowed to vote. Um, So immediately when it came to one person, one vote, um, immediately what happened was we got a black government. It was run by the ANC, and preceding this election, um, we had there was a long series of talks where they negotiated a new um, constitution, and white people got off really, really, really lucky. Like, um, if you looked at Zimbabwe, they also got off really lightly. But like Mozambique, the white people that were living there lost all of their income and everything. They lost all their money and stuff.
Mm.
White people in South Africa, the average white person like myself didn't pay any form of penalty. Um, this is this becomes relevant in a few minutes. So the we were very, very lucky. There was that one of the political prisoners was a guy called Nelson Mandela. He became the president later on, and he, together with a guy called Cyril Ramaphosa, who's the current president, is a really good guy. They decided that there was no way that you could build a new country on this if you can't let bygones be bygones. So they effectively, no one paid the price for apartheid. And so now nobody hides away from the past. Everyone's aware of apartheid and so forth and such on, and it's very at like school level. It's really well educated. A lot you learn about this. The only real problem, and where the let bygones be bygones becomes a problem, is that it allowed a lot of the white population to live in this little bubble that apartheid wasn't so bad. And if you go back to one of the things I said when I lived in the northern Transvaal, the kids weren't aware of this, how they weren't really aware of how apartheid worked. And so what happened was that you still have these pockets within the white population that think apartheid wasn't so bad and maybe we should return to the days of that. And in fact, there's a small town in South Africa called Orania, where some right-wing weirdos bought a whole town. The town was owned by the government. They bought the whole town and they registered it as a close corporation. And so they just won't allow any black people to come and live in the town. So there's still a segregated town in South Africa. So, yeah, there is quite a lot of racial tension in South Africa because you've got a massively, remember, apartheid was legally on the books for like probably around 100 years. I mean, the Land Act of 1913 deprived black people of land ownership in South Africa. It's like that was an official law. It came in, and black people overnight didn't own any land. So this impoverished an entire. And don't forget that, like at its peak, the white population in South Africa was only 10%.
Wow.
So you got like 90% of people who owned nothing. So you still have this massive, massive population of impoverished people with this thin little crust of wealthy white.
Yeah.
And then interspersed with it, I'm ashamed to say it, but there's a lot of white people who don't think apartheid was so terrible. But the human rights impact of it were, you can't put it on, you can't sum it up.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that the problem with apartheid is that we could all look at the Holocaust and you can see these images that are so compelling and so hard and so sort of heartbreaking. We can all have empathy with the Jewish people.
Mm.
The apartheid governments never allowed us to have those kind of images,
Mm.
and they didn't do anything short term and as terrible as the Holocaust. But if you step back and you look at the bigger picture of what apartheid did to 90% of the South African population, I would say it's pretty close to on par with the Holocaust,
Yeah.
as in, you know, so they might not have been gassing people, but yeah, man, like there's 45 million people who live in poverty as a result.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I'm sure it's still not changed that much.
no,
Like when you like
unfortunately, it hasn't.
you it would take something massively dramatic to shift that much time and that many people being put down for so long.
Yeah, and they've had really, really poor economic growth. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but South Africa is a tragic environment.
Mm.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize the depth of it, and I I know very little. I've not been there, but I had a friend who he was actually from Zimbabwe, or is from Zimbabwe, and he had been living in South Africa, and he would just tell me kind of how dangerous it was, and I just didn't. I guess I didn't. Again, like I said, with my history lessons, I never realize the depth of why things were the way they were down there, because I've had white friends go there and all's pretty good. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh yes, be careful, but you're all good. And then my friend Stuart from Zimbabwe, who's a black man, didn't have the same experience.
No. The thing is that if you're a tourist and you go to South Africa is like the abused spouse whose bruises are all under her clothes.
Mm.
You don't, you know, she hides it really well, but
Mm-hmm.
if you really look under it, you'll see the broken bones and the bruises. And
Damn,
yeah, yeah,
crazy.
it's a,
So, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no, it's a sad situation. So,
Yeah. Good
yeah,
Lord. Um, it's something I've been talking about recently with people that I've met now here in Norway, and talking about the differences in like where you grow up in your education, and you kind of touched on it with your version of education when you were growing up. What was that like? What was like the teaching way that what were they trying to indoctrinate you in with?
yeah, shit. So, I didn't fit in too well. um, so South Africa was, so we had this Christian national education, and I'm not religious, but um, there is Christianity, and then there is, I'm sorry, American Christianity,
Yeah.
which is like, it says Christianity on the box, but it's got nothing to do with anything that Jesus said. Um, and that was like the South African, it, they didn't sing and they didn't, but it was ultra conservative. I mean, like um, we had our official state religion was Christianity. It was a very, very solid form of, I think it's like sort of Lutheran church. But so we had Bible classes um, and and we I the Satanic Panic hit hard when I was a kid, and I happened to be one of those people that like to wear all black, and I really liked a Metallica shirt or two,
Yeah.
and so we had a couple of times when I was a kid, the the occult crimes division of the South African police came and did lectures at school. Yeah, we had an occult crimes division
Wow.
of the police, and yeah, and I was this sort of outcasty kid who like really liked listening to sort of metal, and then we had like Dungeons and Dragons is evil, and that kid over there who's like got a Metallica shirt on, that's Satan, and so yeah, that was tough, and as well to boot, there was a very heavy emphasis on 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 sport, but like particularly a really shit game called rugby, um,
Yeah.
and I had to play rugby when I was at school because it was compulsory. You played sport or you got the crap beaten out of you by a teacher. So because they could hit you when you were a kid. So I had to go and play rugby, and I was terrible at that game. Um, I didn't like it at all, and so it was. It was just it was all forms of insanity, just yeah. I was school was not School was not great. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can't believe they had an occults division because
Oh, yeah,
that's
it was
ridiculous.
the occult crimes division, and the guy who headed it up, I think that the division still exists. Um, the Satanic Panic never really left South Africa. It was really popular, um, but one of the they did these lectures at school with us, ooh, and there was the other lectures as well. I'll tell you about those. But so we had these lectures from these people, and I could never figure out if they were just fucking with us or if they were telling the truth, because this guy would tell us how some Satanists came and hung his cat, and I'm like, who the fuck hangs people's cats?
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know, my morbid sense of curiosity or so was like, I've tried to pick up a cat that was unhappy to have me around. How do you get a rope around a cat's neck and hang it? Like,
Yeah.
the mechanics of this just don't add up, So,
Hmm.
uh, I couldn't. And at one stage, he claimed that somebody had sent him a box with eyeballs in it, and they had to have them tested to see if they were human or bovine eyes. And I was like, surely cow eyes are really distinguishable from human eyes.
Yeah, I would think so.
But I I don't know. Like growing up later, like maybe there was like some people who really were just fucking with this guy and were
Yeah.
like sending him this stuff and found a dead cat, or was he fucking with us? And I would really like to know, did the eyeballs really happen?
Mm.
And who did it if it did?
Right.
Because they would have like these lectures. I attended several of these lectures, and there was a book that we all got and everything. So it was. it was crazy. The other lectures I was telling you about, sorry, was we had sort of abstinence-only sex education. That
Hmm.
was,
Yeah.
this, and it wasn't called abstinence-only sex education. It was just like called growing up in South Africa. Um, and one of the ways that they thought that would beat the sex out of us was to have these. I, I I don't believe they were doctors. They claimed to be doctors from some hospital coming and giving us a lecture on STDs or STIs,
Hmm.
sexually transmitted infections. And some of the stories were just, it was like, that's physically not possible.
Yeah.
An impressionable young person listening to this and like, sort of like, oh man, I feel nauseous. That's too much. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you can really die of genital warts.
Right.
Um, yeah, somebody died apparently.
Mm.
And there was some infection that resulted in green blisters that extended from the person's like sort of collarbone down to their knees, and I look and in hindsight, like I don't know if that's possible, like
Yeah.
yeah, so it was it was an American conservative's wet dream. It was just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say these stories that you were told in South Africa sound eerily similar to things I was told in Ohio, in the 90s about
Yeah.
about these Satanists coming to our graveyard in Ashland, Ohio, and killing cats and yeah, yeah, all these
Yeah.
STDs that you could get that like your dick would fall off, or fill in the most like horrific descriptor of what it was. So I think our teachers might have been reading out of the same handbook, it seems.
Yeah, it was yeah. And some of the stuff was, excuse me, I remember in one of the Satanic Panic lectures, um, Guns N' Roses had released the spaghetti incident.
Hmm.
Um, and this guy was like explaining that this is actually a human brain. I was like, looks like spaghetti to me.
I just
Yes.
I don't know. The other one that pops into my head that I think everyone who was kind of into the rock or metal scene back in those days, where the Satanic Panic was there, was like Marilyn Manson took out his ribs to suck his own dick too, and
Yeah,
all this
yeah, I
stuff,
heard that
and it was like,
one.
I'm like thinking back to all these things that they were using, all these little anecdotes to be like, ooh, yeah, I'm gonna run away from that. It was like, I think I was more morbidly curious like you, and just like, who's doing this, or like, I'm more
It's like,
interested in this instead of being like, ooh, I'm scared. I was like, I think I'm gonna check that out. It sounds
yeah,
interesting.
like, yeah, like at the minute that I heard the same thing, and it just was like more questions than answers. Like, which doctor would do that?
Mm,
And if the doctor did, if you if you found a surgeon that was willing to remove ribs, would you really be able to do that? And
mm,
if you could, would it be any good?
right.
And there were so
Same.
many,
So many
and
questions of the whys and
uh,
hows, and like, I don't know, like, because also like, yeah, maybe the ribs going away helps, but also you have a spinal cord that only bends a certain amount of way.
yeah, and I very quickly found that the thing that you shouldn't do is stick up your hand and say like, "Hey, if Marilyn Manson did do that, this happened."
Right.
Don't ask those questions. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing also that it was a very like heterosexual, like man loves a
Oh yeah.
woman, just like that whole narrative as well. I'm sure if we're common on these couple things, I'm sure that was a very like a boy loves a girl and then they make a baby and it's a boy or a girl and then they live happily ever after.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very much that. Um, yeah, that was, yeah. The queers were, yeah, queer was a slur.
Mm-hmm.
Queer still is a slur.
Yeah.
Um, but like, yeah, that was that's a weird thing because like, so yeah, there was like heterosexuality or nothing,
Mm-hmm.
like anything else is an abomination. Um, and it, I think that it was up until the new constitution in '94 that being gay was illegal in South Africa. I'd, like just arrest you and shit.
Mm.
Um, but my my mother is my mother is a strange person, um, and she was she was terrified that one of her kids would be gay.
Mm.
She was like really like, I remember hearing it like, I knew about gay people before I really knew about like heterosexual people because my mom was like, yeah, the queers, they recruit. I'm like, what do they recruit you for?
Right. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna join the queer army or something,
Yeah.
So she's yeah, she was just fucking weird, and she was terrified that one of her, because she had like 5 kids.
Mm.
Um, well, four of her own kids and one stepchild. She remarried, and but that stepchild is practically like her kid. So
Mm.
she was terrified that one of us would be queer, and then um, yeah, when ultimately when I did come out to her, it didn't go so well. So yeah, she,
Yeah. Yeah, anytime I speak with anyone that has had to have that experience, I'm always curious to see, especially like seems like we kind of came from a similar type of background, even though we were very different locations in the world. Yeah, like how did she react?
man, poorly.
Yeah.
So so I told her in 2018.
Mm.
I said like, look, I didn't tell her any. I sort of limited the compartmentalized what I was going to tell her.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, we're not going to have discussions of sexuality. I'm just going to like tell her I'm transgender and I'm going to transition. Um, I didn't think she needed to know anything else.
Mm.
And I told her that, and she was like, um, no. And I was like, okay, well, I, I can't change that. It's
Yeah.
it's just the way it is. And yeah, she wasn't so very happy about that, and she started sending me a whole lot of articles written by a guy called Walt Heyer,
Mm.
who's like a real. He's got some website called transgender regret or sex change regret or
Oh
something
boy.
terrible like
Mm.
that. So,
Yeah.
and she was like, you know, she loves me, but she can't condone this because one day she's going to have to stand in front of her creator, and
Mm.
answer for this and answer for that. And, if he says, what did you do? So I was like, okay, well, let's just make it easy. And we haven't spoken since. So, yeah.
Shit.
Well, I can't place the blame completely on me coming out. That was more like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Sure,
because me and my parents have got like me and my parents have got like a really we don't have a relationship. So how would I explain this? So when my parents split up, I was like a little kid. They split up because my biological father is like, he is diagnosable with something, because he ding dongs between hardcore religious fanatic and alcoholic Rolling Stones fan. But he goes like, I don't know which one is worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, and the thing is, that he doesn't. I mean, look, that guy's hit rock bottom. Like, he plowed into rock bottom, and he made a big fat dent in that bottom of it. And he just, I don't know, he refuses to. He doesn't want to get better.
Yeah.
I think that I think it's very hard to struggle with addiction, and I have a lot of sympathy for him that that he can't motivate himself. I don't quite understand it, but I feel a lot of sympathy for him from that. I'm not so sympathetic about the religious weirdo stuff, because he's that. I'm sorry, that's a choice to be an asshole.
Yes. 100%.
So, and I mean, one of the last times I spent any time with him, he was like street harassing like two women who he said were lesbians. I was like, it's just two women on the street. They could be lesbians. I was like, okay, look, I'm sorry. This is so. Yeah, that was. Yeah, so that crashed like a decade ago, but and then my mother remarried, and yeah, our relationship was kind of shitty from then, because she sort of abdicated her role as a parent when she got involved with her new husband, and yeah, it was like there was a lot of neglect, and sort of, so the road was rocky. And then I said, okay, well, I'm not the cisgender person that you thought I was. And then she was just like, and I was like, okay, cool. That's the straw that broke the camel's back. So I've got to give her some credit in that she didn't end the relationship, and she didn't end it because I'm queer. I ended it. And that's not like a breakup, It's not like, yeah, I left her, It's like, I think she would still want to be involved in my life, but I didn't give her the opportunity. So maybe that's a weakness on my part. But it was a compound. It wasn't one single event, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So how has it been since you started transitioning your just day-to-day
Yeah,
life?
well,
How has that been, like, with just people in general, with with the world we live in?
well, the world I live in is Denmark, so
Right.
it's been like a internally, it's been awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so you know, yeah, society. So look, I think that my ultra brave wife decided that she was going to stay with me. So
Mm.
she's she's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Um, but but that was rocky in the beginning when that
Mm-hmm.
when that happened. I mean, your spouse doesn't transition, and you're like, oh yeah, that's cool. It's tough, you
Yeah.
know. Um, but she's just amazing, and we somehow sort of got through that. And I think that's more a commentary on how on her than me.
Mm.
So that worked out really well. Obviously, my mental state improved quite dramatically when I started taking hormones, and I just became a much nicer person, I suppose. Um, but and I was very, very fortunate. I worked for a company. I've subsequently changed that company, but um, when I came out, I told the company that, like, hey, I'm transitioning, and they were like, okay, well, that's all right. Just uh, tell us what name you want, and
Mm.
give us your new social security number, and then yeah, you tell us if you want to tell the company, or you tell everyone. Just like send out an email to everyone, and that was it.
Mm.
So I I transitioned on the job, and it was like a nothing burger. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Um, and then I recently started looking around for a career change, and I signed on to a development company that does machine control. And yeah, I had to give my passport to, and I have a French passport, which is a fucking nightmare.
Mm.
Um, I had to give my passport to the company to go and fly to Norway, coincidentally.
Yeah.
And they looked at that and they were like, yeah, your name on your passport and your name on your Danish identity is different. So I said, yeah, that's because I don't have a Danish passport yet. And this is my French passport and I'm transgender. And they were like, okay, that's why you got a deep voice. Okay, cool. And it was like, they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
So,
Fuck yeah.
you know, and I was like, yeah, sorry, maybe I should have told you that when you employed me. And they were like, eh, so Danish society is it's not American society.
Right.
They don't care, like well, I wouldn't say that they don't care, but I am very fortunate. I've never faced any form of harassment. It hasn't negatively impacted my career
Mm.
opportunities. Um, it's it's been easy.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, it's been easy enough that I feel a little guilty that it was easy.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, very different, but with with my alcoholism, and like when I had to quit drinking because I didn't have a choice. It was either like stop drinking or die, and I chose to stop drinking, and I have had no struggles. And I know so many people who are trying to overcome addiction, and I sometimes feel guilty because it was so easy for me. Like, I know it's a very
yeah,
different perspective, but in my form of addiction, it was quite easy to stop that. So I mean, it's hard. I know in my mind, it's hard to be like, it wasn't that bad when I know so many people are dealing with
Yeah.
such hell because of their addiction.
Yeah. No, that's something I totally get. It's like it is that, this we're all trained to have these sort of like, if you fight off addiction or function in society as a transgender person, or we've got this sort of, it's got to be like some sort of rocky moment where you run up the stairs and you punch meat and all sorts of things to overcome this difficult thing. And when you don't have that, you're like, oh, man, maybe I'm missing something,
Mm,
like maybe I'm just too stupid to notice that I'm supposed to be suffering. And so, yeah, I'm really happy for you that like it's been easy for you.
yeah.
Um, like that's like, yeah, right on,
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I look at like transgender people I know in the United Kingdom and
Mm,
in America,
yeah.
um, and France, and everyone is like, holy crap, that's like super shit. So,
Mm, yeah.
you know, I know a transgender girl who lives in Copenhagen, and she comes from Hungary.
Oh
She
yeah.
can't go home anymore to Hungary.
Jesus. Yeah.
Because like if she goes back to Hungary, then according to her documents, she's a dude and she can't function like a dude. And if she could get arrested. So, and it's like, yeah, I just got another job.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah. Jesus. I know. I like thinking about just these horrible laws that are like that she could go back and get arrested just for being who she is
yeah, it's like
fucking
crazy.
insane to me. I don't understand how. I mean, I think I do. I think it's just people out there that have never been who they wanted to be or lived the life they want to live, and then they see people being who they want to be and that is threatening to them for some reason, which is just a very a big form of just covering up for your lack of confidence in yourself and just again lack of being able to truly be yourself. But I just I
Yeah,
don't know, it's fucked up. It's super fucked up.
I I I don't really understand it. I look around at the moment, and if you look at the politics and everything, like now, if I open up a web a sort of newspaper online or something, if the word cancel culture comes up anywhere, I know that they're going to be talking about like transgender people. Um, I don't know why, but there's some sort of weirdo link between cancel culture and transgender people.
Mm.
I don't
Yeah.
know why. And then there's like this, anytime someone mentions like women's sports, it's going to be, okay, there's going to be some. I don't understand what the obsession with transgender people is. It's like we like zero point 0.6, maybe 1% of the population, and we just really want to be left alone.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I just want to live life.
we're just normal people. So there's like literally nothing exciting about it. And then you got these like, I'm like, I don't understand. It's like more crap is said about transgender people than there are transgender people every day.
Right.
I don't understand why. It's like, yeah, it, yeah. I
I don't.
mean, I obviously I've stumbled into like Matt Walsh, and I'm like, there's something weird about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like that Graham Linehan guy whose wife has left him. I'm like, you you need help, man.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go see a psychiatrist, and you got to get some drugs for that because you have an obsession that's ended a relationship for you.
Right. Yeah.
And then obviously I've heard about Jordan Peterson, and I'm like, is this the best Canada has to offer?
Hmm.
This guy who goes online and cries about things. I don't know,
Yeah.
it's it's kind of interesting being the boogeyman,
Hmm.
boogie person, the boogie they them.
Yeah, yeah. The
It's,
boogie, yeah. The boogie they, I like that. The boogie they them.
yeah, it's like what the fuck.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
just
That's yeah, that's the thing I don't understand is like yeah, back I mean it kind of like full circle to this satanic panic. It's kind of a new version of like the boogeyman, like you said, or the boogie they them, the boogie she, whatever they want to put with it, and
yeah,
it's like
yes,
it's just it's humans, and like you said, it's a very small population, but it's such a like hot
yeah,
spot, a hot ticket. They're so fucking scared of people being themselves. It's like get a new
yeah,
obsession.
yeah. And I haven't I haven't really actually linked that sort of satanic panic, transgender panic. But man, I'm really running afoul of these fucking panics. It's getting a bit much. I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to start building model trains or something because I don't think anyone's gonna panic about that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
right. Goodness. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. And I I don't know what is going to take those panics away. They're there for no reason, but I don't know what is going to make any movement in it.
the question that I have about the whole panic is, are they organic? Are people really worried about this? Did these grow like mushrooms on a log in the forest all on their own? Or, yeah, that doesn't make much sense. Or are they synthetic? Is it all marketing? Is it all hype? I don't understand. It's, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I don't know if we will ever understand because I don't I don't imagine us having those same mindsets as these people. So I don't know if we'll be in their head at any point.
yeah. Well, I can give you my mum's phone number if you like. You can ask her about that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we can. I don't know if we'll get
Yeah.
any solid
Yeah, yeah.
answers though. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I
it's
mean, I am happy that it's in your day today that it has been a positive experience. That's
yeah,
I love for you that is your version of your story, which I know so many people don't get to have, but I do love that is your version. It makes me very happy that your experiences have been like that.
yeah. It's been, yeah. It's for me. It's been such a affirming, transformative,
Yeah.
affirming thing. Like yeah. I was like to be blunt. I was just like before transition. I was just like a really miserable person, and then took hormone replacement therapy, and suddenly the world was colorful. So
Mm,
yeah,
that's beautiful. That's so
yeah,
beautiful. I love that. Love that. All right, I'm going to switch directions. And I like to ask this one on because I just love traveling and the world is starting to kind of open back up and we can kind of think of like freely traveling again a little bit. If you were given a plane ticket right now to anywhere in the whole world, where would you go?
yeah. That's a. I'd go to this like little Italian place called Bassano del Grappa.
Hmm.
Yeah,
All right. I'll have to look this
I
up.
there's a little town just outside of Bassano called Simonza, and it's not like a nice town at all. It's just like a little spit of town that's sort of stuck on the side of the foothills of the Alps. I like paragliding, and
Okay.
so some of my best flights have been at Bassano, and the landing site, once you've been flying, you can land, and there's like this little bar restaurant, and you can sit down and have an ungodly amount of these Italian lemon sodas that are really nice. I know I'm really ambitionless, and they make like really nice sandwiches, and you can just sit down there after a long flight and watch everybody else land, and just the atmosphere. It's like a whole town that's just collected with a whole bunch of paragliders, and it's. I suppose if you don't like paragliding, Busano del Grappa might be a bit of a shit place, but yeah, so,
I mean,
yeah,
to me, it sounds amazing. Even if you're not into paragliding, you just get to watch people like free flying down and then like coming to
yeah,
enjoy some food and some drinks. I mean,
yeah,
I think either like skydiving or paragliding or some sort of like version of like, quote unquote free fall. I think I need to do that in my life because I've always had these dreams of free falling where I wake up and I'm like fucking horrified. It was like night terror versions since I was a kid. And so I think also if I get close to even at a hotel, if I'm on a balcony and it's super close to the edge and I'm really high up, I get this weird feeling of like wanting to jump. Like I'm not trying to harm
yeah,
myself, but like I just want to feel it so badly. And I know if I jumped, I'd be like, fuck, immediately because I
yeah,
know
yeah.
bad things were coming.
Yeah, I've had a few accidents, and that feeling of free fall, it's a scary feeling
Yeah.
when you like sort of. I've had a collapse at like 1,000 meters, and my
Oof.
wings folded up, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to count to six, and at six, if I haven't gotten that unfolded, I'm going to throw my reserve parachute because yeah,
Damn.
it unfolded, so I
Okay.
didn't never have to throw the reserve parachute. So I've never had to throw a reserve. I'm not that good a pilot, but um, yeah, yeah, try paragliding. Like that's it's like have you ever tried out sailing on those like little dinghies? Those little sort of 1, 2 man boats
No.
with like the little. Have you tried windsurfing?
No.
Have you tried surfing?
Yes. I have surfed.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. It's like three-dimensional surfing.
Okay.
So
I as silly as it is, the first time I ever stood up on a or got up on a surfboard, I immediately thought of the Beach Boys lyrics, like "Catch a wave and you're sitting on top of the world," because it just
yeah,
feels so incredible that you've gotten yourself up and you're riding this like the power of water. So a
yeah,
three-dimensional version of that sounds pretty amazing, and I can imagine just being in the air, just kind of like gliding.
yeah. It's one of the things that paragliders don't really sell the sport very well. But like
Hmm.
you sit in your harness, which is like it's like a lazy boy that's attached to a wing,
Hmm.
and but you can feel all the tension from the wing is transmitted through to your harness from the lines. So you can feel all the bumps in the air, and then you can feel the resistance. You turn by pulling your brakes, and you can feel the resistance on the brake, and you can hear the sound of the wind through the wing through the lines, and it's a very you steer with your weight and with your brakes, and you've got to lean into your turns properly, and you know, and you feel when you get the bite on a thermal, and you turn into it, and you can feel when you slip out, and you have to sort of wrestle into the turn a bit. It's a very it's a whole body thing
Yeah.
that happens, and you have to really tune into the air, and so it's like, yeah, you must give it a shot.
Well, if no other paraglider has ever sold it, you have just sold it to me because that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's like, I, I can't explain, like, you know you got to relax, though. You got to,
Mm,
like, sort of, you got to look once you get high enough up that the world becomes like a theoretical element below you. It's like a monopoly board. You just look down, and it's like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, I
right.
get terrified when I come into land, because then it starts to mean something again. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
you go around, you, like, sort of circle, like, oh crap, this is fucking high.
Yeah.
But when you're like 1,000 meters above the ground, it's like, oh, it's a monopoly board, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So, and then you feel the wind, and you feel everything, and it's like, you feel it, and you're in control of, and you're riding it like and then you come into land, you're like, oh crap, that's high. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Well, whenever you get to go down to Italy to do that, I'll meet you down there.
I will keep you informed. The other place which I really like to go to is Annecy.
Mm,
Um, yeah. So uh, yeah, it's specifically just south of Annecy, there's a little town called Dussart, which is, once again, it's like a little spit of town that has a really good paragliding place, and randomly some of the really nicest looking horses.
mm.
I don't know why there's random horses walking around, and really
Okay.
nice ones.
Yeah. All
And
right.
yeah, so go to Dussart.
Yeah, they both sound really lovely.
Yeah.
I would love to. I was actually just speaking about Italy earlier today, and it's one of many places I have not been. So I would be fully in for those, especially ones that you're describing that aren't the typical places in Italy.
Yeah. I I have made a habit of going to, like, the smaller, sort of off the beaten track places, like, I've been to Morocco, I've been flying there, which was
Amazing.
that was weird, and had a lot of cactuses. Um, but I can tell you that nobody on this planet can cook like Moroccans,
Hmm.
and nobody can cook over an open flame like a Moroccan. Man, those people are like, I don't understand how that whole country isn't obese, because
Yeah.
their food is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, weirdly enough, the same person I was talking to Italy about, we were talking about Morocco as well. And the first thing I ever learned to cook, which was during like the heavy lockdowns with COVID, was Moroccan food. And I ate it and I crave it. So I would lose my mind in Morocco to eat their food.
go.
Yeah.
It's awesome food, and I would say go down to the south, because the south of Morocco is like really nice. Either the Atlas Mountains, or like way down south.
Okay.
And then, like, Spain, I've been to a little town called El Gondonales, which is like this little white town. It's just stuck on the side of a mountain, and they just eat a lot of pork and fly. So, um, yeah. So,
All right.
we're,
I
yeah,
love that. I love that.
small little places that the normal tourist doesn't go to. Go
Yeah.
to those places,
Yeah.
because,
That's the best advice. I love that.
yeah,
All right. I have two more questions for you.
shoot.
The first one is What would you want the world to know about you?
I really just want to use the bathroom and not like creep on your genitals. Like if I go into the ladies' room, I'm gonna take a pee, and much like spiders, I'm more scared of you than you are of me. So, um, and yeah, I don't know. Like, I suppose I'd want the world to know that I'm happy now. So maybe then there wouldn't be like an issue about transgender people. No,
Yeah,
I'm I'm happy. So
yeah,
yeah,
that's beautiful. I love that, and I'm happy that you're able to say that. There's not a lot of people that get to say that, and you've found yourself and you've become happy, which is really really beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, last one for you. If you had the ear of everybody in the world, what would you say to them?
Yeah, what would I say? I think that I would say that politicians are not your friends, and you should rather pay attention to the people around you before you listen to someone who wants to tell you that they are in charge.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I think that there is this thing. I think that one of the problems that I see in the world is that somewhere along the line we've forgotten that politicians work for us, you know, and people have started to view these people as leaders.
Hmm.
And no, I think that leaders are not politicians. Leaders are um, community organizers. Leaders are, um, I want to say, like the minister at your church, because they're supposed to be leaders. They're not supposed to be political figures. Leaders are, they're these organically grown things
Mm-hmm.
that happen in communities. They're the senior member at your hiking club or something
Mm.
like that. They're these people who have grown into these positions, but we've somehow taken what the British used to call civil servants and we've elevated them to being like leaders.
Mm.
And politics has now become like a sporting event, and we allow them to tell us who we dislike and who our enemy is. And it's like, well, maybe humankind enemies are people who want to divide us from each other.
Mm.
I don't know. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's
Well,
a really well put of what leaders are. They're not given to you. It's like you said, it's the person that has worked their way up and gained your trust, and you fully see that you know that your best interest is in mind because they've worked their way to that point to gain your trust. Not just like, hey, you have these options, pick one person, and then they rule everything. I don't think
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
leader.
No, it's not. And I mean, the British used to call them civil servants, and
Mm.
I think we should remember that servant is, I don't think we should regard them as like lower than anyone else, but we got to remember what they're employed for. They're employed to serve our purposes. And our purpose is not to ignore climate change. Our purpose is not to have a problem with immigrants. Our purpose is to be functional, happy people. So, yeah.
And this, Christian nationalist shit that's out there that makes you think that it should just be white, male, heterosexual, and nothing else is good enough needs to go away as well, because it's a big, beautiful, colorful world out there. And, your Bible is, telling you to love and accept everyone because your God created them. So also, as a creationist, you should be the biggest tree-hugging liberal hippie there is, because if your God created this world, fundamentally you cannot treat it the way you do. And his creation.
Just the thing, it's the greatest conundrum. I'm like, Jesus, this definitely not white dude.
Right.
Hippie, commie, didn't own a gun.
That did not, would never, would never.
It's like, like, as I said, I'm not religious, I'm not spiritual, but I certainly do find a lot of value in the things that Jesus said, like,
Yeah.
I mean, who can argue with the statement of like, who is without sin, you cast the first stone. I mean, This is like, the profoundness of this is like, it's, and then you're like, what bullshit are you fucking Christian nationalists? It's like, how did you go from there to no, Jesus, you guys are insane. So,
They missed an exit somewhere in their learning curve, but that's a whole other topic. But I so appreciate your time. Thank you so much for chatting with me, and it's been such a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. I hope that you find at least like sort of usable audio from all of that. So,
yeah, it's all it's beautiful. It goes to show that we can grow up on different continents and different parts of the world at different times in life, but we do have commonalities, and that's what I look for in this, is because we're human. No matter what we are, we're human, and there's connection wherever we're from, whatever we look like, whoever we are. It's the beauty of life and that connection that we can make. So it was wonderful to get an insight into your life.
Yeah, thanks. It was really cool. I've enjoyed speaking to you. So
thank you for listening to the Beautifully Human podcast. To hear more beautiful stories from beautiful humans, follow us on Spotify and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at the Beautifully Human Podcast. Peace signs up.